All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're coming to us live at or on the replay. This is Kai on the Fly with Kai, and I'm Kai Deering, and I'm just super excited to bring to you once a week just some tips, tricks, and hacks for entrepreneurs. And today it was pretty funny. I was chatting with a dear friend of mine. We've known each other for, I believe, over a decade. We've worked together on a couple of different projects, and I said, have you not been on my show? And she was like, no. And I couldn't honestly believe she hadn't been on the show because this woman is a rock star. I mean, think about this. Not only is she, a Stanford MBA graduate, a highfalutin, seriously, an amazing corporate career. She's actually mentored with John C. Maxwell personally. And now she's kind of reinvented herself. And I love the fact that she is just totally down to earth, tells it like it is, and uses her own experience to help people that really want to do better in their careers or make a pivot or need to just kind of battle those demons that all of us have and limiting beliefs. So not only is that going to be an amazing discussion, but my other favorite thing about her is she's a dear friend. She's helped me out in a lot of interesting situations. On a side note, she's got a huge heart and just a ton of sympathy because she's a chaplain on the side as well, because her heart is really in her faith. And so it was really a wonderful opportunity to have and lean on her when my mother passed, when one of our business partners passed. She has always really just been a champion and a rock for me. So I'm just delighted and excited to be able to introduce you to some of my tribe that maybe doesn't know you yet, because you are truly a shero. You're awesome. I love you, woman. I really do.
Thank you so much, Kai. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on this show. I love your show, and it's exciting to be here. I do want to clarify one thing because I don't want anyone to go say she's not an MBA at Stanford. So
A
I do have
BA
two.
master's.
Yes, I have a master's, I have a bachelor's. I actually studied in the MBA program, but didn't get an MBA.
So I will clarify this. She holds a master's of education and a BA in psychology from Stanford University. Perfect. I appreciate that too. I'm really a stickler on that too. Like, people will call me an author and I'll say, no, I'm actually a contributing author. I've never done my own book. Right. So I want to be really authentic and clear too, because the truth is good enough. Because Renee, you're a rock star.
Thank
But
you.
I do want to just ask you, because I love that you've had this amazing like corporate career, this incredible education. And people would say, man, you got it all. I mean, truly, you had it all, like in the sense of it all. But as we chatted about, it's like what makes people like us or you or whatever the entrepreneur is kind of restless, where it's like, is this all? And everyone else is like, you're just doing so great. And we're like, and this is it? Tell us about that, because it's just people don't understand that sometimes where that comes from.
Well, you know what? I have to admit, I really did feel like I had it all in my corporate job. I thought it was absolutely the best thing ever because I took my entrepreneurial spirit and I actually created the environment that I wanted in my workplace. But during that time, near the end, I had an experience where I met someone, I married them, and they turned out to not be the right person for me to be married to. And in the process of getting that annulled, I actually had also found myself pregnant. And I lost a child at the end of the second trimester. And that messed me up like no one's business. And I wanted to die. And I needed to take some time off work to actually deal with the thoughts that were going into my head, to process my grief, to process everything I was going through. And so when I came back to work, I found out my supervisor was dealing with her own set of fears because she couldn't do my job. And suddenly everything in the corporate place changed. It changed how she responded to me. It changed what she allowed me to do. It changed the level of authority I had and the level of access. And that was the beginning of me realizing, you know what? It's time to make a new change.
I appreciate you being transparent on that. And I know the audience, how many of you can relate to, having a tragedy and expecting, somebody to respond like a human in corporate, and they don't. And it's just a devastating wake up call that it isn't sometimes the safe haven that we thought it was, and it's time to do a change. Well,
Yeah.
I'm proud of you for changing, having that defining moment and doing something different. And I know you haven't had a job since 2008. So mega congratulations. Woo.
Well, I can't say I totally haven't had a job. I have been going through in and outs because, one of the things that happens when you're trying to discover yourself is you fall back into your comfort zone. And so I fell back into my comfort zone in various ways, which created jobs, but only jobs where I could still create my own environment. Like I still so I started my own department in the corporate job. I went to a university. I started my own department there.
Remember that. You're right.
So I kept I wanted this business that absolutely worked. And then when the lack of faith and trust came in, next thing you know, I was employed doing still whatever it was I wanted to do.
Okay, well, so at least if you had to do a consulting gig, you created it. So that's good. And it allowed you the opportunity to continue. And we talked about, and you had some interesting insights because, the corporate thing was kicked to the curb 2008. Let's put it that way, right? And you've
Yes.
done some
Oh,
different
yes.
iterations since then. So
Mhm.
talk to somebody in here right now that's maybe tried some other entrepreneurial ventures and then bounced to something else. Because I know you've done that too. And you called it finding yourself just now. But you also talked about, what is that reinvention? What is really the story that's going on behind there? Because there's a pattern there too.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So yeah, every time that I reinvented myself, it was a matter of this push and pull me between believing that I could do what I wanted to do and not believing that I could do what I wanted to do. And so it's the struggle as you're pushing through your comfort zone. But what I have really found over the years is that if you keep changing, you still keep bringing you. And so you still keep bringing all of those limiting beliefs. You still keep bringing all of those challenges and you bring it into the next place. And so until you decide to just stop, acknowledge what those limiting beliefs are, really become aware of them, and then start making different choices when they start filling up your head, nothing is going to work. You're not going to find where you want to settle.
And I know you knew my mom very well, and that makes me so happy. My mom's passed a few years ago, and she used to always say, when I was doing something repeating, she'd say, "Guess what, Kai? Everywhere you are, there you are." And I'd be like, "Oh, she got me." So that's
Yes.
amazing. I love that. What about, so I'd like to dive into that a little bit more. So if you see something that keeps repeating over and over and over again, and sometimes it's a limiting belief, sometimes it's just something that isn't serving you or a story that you've told yourself. How, and thanks, Jordan. Jordan said, yeah, she agrees with everything you're saying. But how do you pattern interrupt, right? How do you break from that? First of all, how do you identify it? And then how do you break from it?
Okay, well, that's a good question. So, one of the things that I've done over the years is I've studied positive psychology, neurolinguistic programming, neuroscience, the Enneagram, like so many of these different disciplines. And the latest one is positive intelligence. And I found that in all of them, it's the same process. And the process is first, you have to stop and notice. The next thing you do is you have to choose to respond differently. And so that middle piece, right? Positive intelligence calls that the self-command muscle, right? And how you get to using and building that self-command muscle is what makes the difference. So let me start with the first piece. So the first piece, you wonder why people journal, why people write things down. Well, there's lots of reasons. So they can remember stuff, so that they know what's going on in the future, so they can talk about it. But one of the reasons for journaling is to write down that voice in your head that is telling you, that is either judging you, judging others, judging circumstances, um, creating negative feelings, creating negative emotions, because once you start writing it down, that starts to lose its impact. That starts to lose its power. That helps you notice it more as you're moving along. And when you notice it, then you can move to that self-command part where you go, oh, let me stop. There could be a different choice, right? And so one of the things you can do to build that self-command muscle is a mindfulness technique. And you can make these up, like truly make these up. So if I was going to make one up for Kai, right, I would say take your dog and pet your dog for 10 seconds and just focus on petting your dog. That right there will calm you down, slow you down, allow you to change. But sometimes we can't do that. Sometimes we're in the middle of a situation and we can't actually take the time to pause and pet a dog.
True.
Right? So what can you do in the process? So I found little things. So one of the things, and let's see, I have one here, is I will roll a pin around in my hand and really just kind of feel all of the texture of the pin and focus on that sensation of touch. And just in 10 seconds, you suddenly feel that you're calming, you're relaxing, and now you can access your clarity. If you don't have a pin, something to do that, you can literally wiggle your toes, touch each toe to the floor, and pay attention to that. If someone's speaking to you and you want to be fully present, then listen to their voice and really listen to the tone and the depth of their voice, the pitch, how loud it goes, how quiet it goes. Any of these things, just 10 seconds, right? And many of you know breathing. So, but when you stop and you go, you're really upset, you're really mad, and you're like, I just gotta breathe. And the other person's looking at you like, oh, they're steaming, right? But the reason why people breathe is because it works, right? So you can find your own little subtle things to do. And that, if you practice that when you're not upset, when you're not emotionally charged, you just decide to do that like several times a day, you'll build that self-command muscle so that when you are emotionally charged, you can like go, oh, got it.
It's funny because I know Jordan here, has a bunch of very active kiddos, and that's fantastic. And I think you're talking about really the bridge from noticing to the bridge to choice is that command muscle, and that bridge is mindfulness. And I just got to tell you, one of your fans, my husband Mark, says, "Hey Renee, awesome comments." He's on
Hey, Mark.
YouTube right now, and he asked you, it's more necessary today given the pandemic and recent world events. So maybe you could address that as well, because it seems like there's a lot more of that happening just with anxiety and whatnot. Great question, Mark.
Oh, hi, Mark. So good to know that you're watching. And thank you for that question. It's a great question. And oh my goodness, yes. You know what's really funny is that people have been behind their screens for so long that when they get out into public and they meet someone, they are now socially awkward. Yes,
Guilty.
yes. So this is a great way to actually just take a moment and you go hi, and you don't like, now what do I do? Do I hug? Do I not hug? Do I touch? Do I not touch? You're like going through
Fist
all that
bump.
stuff. Do I fist bump? Yes. Do I high five? Do I wiggle fingers? Can I wear a mask? Can I not wear a mask? All of that stuff hypes us up. All of that noise in our head. And part of the thing about the noise in their head is that it's not just the questions, it's the judgment that comes with it. Like,
Mhm.
oh, they're going to, or the thoughts that judge you, like, oh, they're going to think I'm like wrong because I went to give them a hug, or I didn't want to wear a mask, or, oh my goodness, that person didn't want to hug, that person didn't. Like, all of that just messes you up. And so how do you stop the voices? A few seconds of mindfulness. And we need to do it more often now than ever.
I agree. And I think, people say, well, I don't judge anybody, in 5 seconds, you've already judged this and that and the other thing. And, what's interesting is you and I talk about this sometimes too. It's the story that we attribute to that. It's
Yeah.
not really what's happening. That person just might have, wearing a mask because they're, recovering from cancer or something. It doesn't mean that they don't, whatever. We have so many weird things. And it's so hard to drop our judgment and our story of what something means. Do you have any quick, is that the mindful still to get over that?
Well, yeah. So we are meaning making creatures, right?
That's
And
right.
we make meaning out of everything. And so what happens is that when we make meaning that is positive, we feel happy. When we make meaning that is negative, we feel like crap,
Yep.
right? And you can choose your meaning. So the self command muscle says stop and choose. So what do you choose, right? So that's the next step. And so what you choose is you choose something that works for you instead of something that works against you. And you can do this by moving into curiosity, like,
Mm.
I really wonder why that person said that. Maybe ask them, right? Like, how many times have we spun around in circles thinking someone thought something because we just didn't ask them, what did you mean? What were you thinking? Why did you say that? Right? So get curious, have compassion for that person because some people are just spinning in their negativity. And you know you've done that at times yourself. So have a little empathy, have a little compassion, and treat them with respect and with kindness. And when you do that, they might go, but wait, I've been an ass. Like, maybe I need to stop that. Maybe I need to change the way I am. Because we really can change how the other person responds by changing how we respond.
That's right. We can't control other people. We can only control ourselves. And what a great, it's Jim Rohn says, isn't if he has a negative thought, he turns it to, isn't that fascinating? Right. And I like yours, judgment to curiosity. You've always sort of, because I mean, hello, you're a chaplain. You've always been sort of this calming person. And we talked about, your strength is always your weakness, and you have a superhero power that you didn't love. This would be a great time to kind of bring that up, because I think people have a gift and they're like, I don't like this gift. I want a different gift. And it's like, let's take it and work in our gift zone versus trying to develop something that we probably will never be good at.
Yeah, that is definitely me. I want it to be, I wanted to be you when I first met you way back when. I'm like, because I'm like, oh, she's like so easy and fluent with all these strangers and all these people. What a wonderful superpower to have. And then I met this other person that had this clarity of thought for thinking in the future. I'm like, oh, I would love to be her, right? And I wanted to be everyone except who I am, right? And as I went in search of really understanding my superpower, everyone kept coming back and they're like, oh, but you present this wonderful, calm presence that brings us peace, that brings us joy, that makes us feel good, that makes us feel safe so that
Yeah.
we can talk to you and be in your presence. And I'm like, yeah, but couldn't I just be like really good at marketing? And what I learned is that we are given a special way of being for a reason, for a purpose.
Mm,
And we attract people who want what our superpower truly is. And if we are looking for success, we need to embrace our superpower. We need to strengthen our superpower because when you don't use it, you start to lose it, right? And it's when you do this, you find more happiness and peace in yourself, and you find yourself being more in the place of ease and flow as you approach your success.
yes, I love that. So quit fighting whatever you're good at, quit comparing yourself and trying to be somebody you're not, and really, blossom those gifts. And you've done a great job with that. And speaking of, that reminds me of the buzzword right now, which is imposter syndrome, right? So I think a lot of people feel that too. Like, I want to be this, but I'm not that. And I know you felt it at the collegiate level. So this is a perfect transition to talk about, what is that? Because all of us have felt it. You start a new job and you're like, if they find out I don't know what the heck I'm doing, you know what I mean? Or you're like, I got this client, if they know I only got started like 2 days ago, so how do we, what is that and how do we combat that?
Well, I'll tell you a really quick story. So, how I got into Stanford University. When I moved to the United States, because I moved here from Canada, I grew up in Europe and Canada, and I moved here, and I went to an all white school. And the guidance counselors told me that I couldn't go to college because no college would accept me. And I was reading all the college applications, and I'm like, well, what about community college? And they're like, no, you can't even get into community college. They won't accept you either. And I was new to the country, and I'm reading this. I'm like, this is like, have the guidance counselors read what I'm reading?
My gosh.
So I decided to apply for the lowest hanging apples, right? So I decided to apply for the Cal States and the UCs, and hope and pray that like maybe they would accept me. But I have I was visiting my cousin who was at Stanford Hospital working on some knee surgery. And he said, by the way, did you apply to Stanford? And I'm like, oh, no, not Stanford. And anyway, the deadline's today. So my mother pulled out this application. She goes, I have an application for Stanford. You can do it right here. So I filled out that application on the floor. And you know how we stress over college applications, like the essay?
For
I
sure.
just wrote a poem. I wrote a poem on the fly. That was on the fly with Renee, right? Just wrote a poem. And then my sister and I, we were racing each other up the stairs of the building that said it had admissions in it. And we got to this one door and we fell on the floor, rolling and laughing. And this woman looked at us and said, excuse me, what are you doing here? And my sister pulls out the application, goes, my sister wants to apply to Stanford University.
Wow.
That was an admissions counselor. She took my application, and kind of the rest is history. But I have been told by everyone that was in a place of influence that I wasn't good enough. So when I went to Stanford, I was like, oh, they only let me in because they needed a Black person. Now, yes, I gotten national merit scholarships as well. But no, it was only because they needed a Black person, or only because they needed to fill their quota. And then I met all these people. I'm like, oh, yeah, they're all smart. And then there's me, right? Imposter syndrome.
Great example.
People put stuff into your head, and then you adopt it, and you adopt it with energy, and you repeat it again and again and again and again to yourself until you believe that it is true. The challenge is changing that. And when you work on changing it, you need to go through that 3-step process I pretty much talked about. Notice it, write it down, weaken its power. Then when you hear that voice again, you choose to stop for a second and then go into a different response.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And that's such a great example. And I know my friends who are parents have it. They're like, or I was even telling you, we've got people in my profession that make multiple 6 figures or $1 million a year, and they've got it, like, am I worthy of all this cash? And so that leads me to another great question, because that would be a good opportunity to hire somebody like you as a coach. And of course, this is not a sales pitch, but I want to talk about, when would you hire a coach to get over that? And when should you go get some serious therapy? You know what I mean? Like, there are some people that just like, maybe that's not enough, or maybe so. If someone's watching this, like, gosh, I really should hire a coach, whether it's you, and we'll get the contact information at the end. How do they identify, do I need a coach? Do I need therapy? How do I find a coach? What is this modality?
Well, thank you so much for asking that. That's a great question, because a lot of people don't understand what coaching is. So very briefly, coaching is about helping you use the amazing person that you are, pulling out that amazing brilliance, through a conversation that is laden with questions that make you go deeper and helping you put together a plan to move forward. Therapy spends its time looking at your past, delving into your past and trying to scratch out those emotions, those feelings through talking about them and by actually experiencing it and being in it, right? They call it talk therapy a lot. That's oftentimes. So if you have been traumatized, like truly, truly traumatized, you need to see a therapist. If you're just dealing with procrastination, you're dealing with being stuck, you're dealing with imposter syndrome, and you actually have another little voice in your head that says, but it might not really be true. And I really want to accomplish this goal, then you need a coach.
Yep.
And a coach is going to do several things for you. They're going to help you notice because sometimes you have blinders on because you've been telling yourself that story so many times. You can't hear that voice, but it shows up for the coach like a big red sign. And so the coach will call you on it and say, hey, you know what? You say that you're not good enough. Tell me, what has your experience been? And then you go through your experience and you're like, oh, maybe I did something right. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
quite true. And so then that imposter syndrome creeps up again as you're moving forward because it's really interesting. If you really believe in your dreams, if you really believe where you're moving to, stuff will pop up to test that faith. And that's where a coach is there to hold you accountable, to actually let you know that saboteur has popped up again, make sure that you recognize it, and then give you the tools to actually move forward.
Yeah, I love it. That's I've not heard that articulated as well as you just did. So trauma, go to therapy. Stuck, hire a coach, right? Like that's oversimplified. I totally agree. And I know we only have a couple minutes. It always goes so fast. But I know obviously you're a huge lifelong learner like I am. And that's one of the things that we always have been kind of kindred about is we like to read, we like to study. Is there any favorite maybe podcast or book or anything that you are just like it changed your world? Like mine was The 1 Minute Millionaire by Mark Victor Hansen. Like that thing just rocked my world. I loved that book. Is there anything as a lifelong learner that you could share with folks that might, rock someone's world? What was your most influential? Was it Tony Robbins, going to his seminar? What was it?
Well, Tony Robbins actually started me just like changing my world completely because I found that there were tools that we could use to actually stop that negative thought and then move to a different response. And, okay, let me tell you, it's the Bible. I know coming from a Christian minister, it's like, what? And it's the Bible because everything that I've been learning is in there. However, we don't always hear it. So my recommendation for people is try Napoleon Hill, right? Because in Napoleon Hill's book, which everyone knows,
Think and Grow Rich.
Think and Grow Rich, thank you, Mind Freeze. Although I have several copies right here. That's why I looked over there. In Think and Grow Rich, he talks about the power of faith. He talks about the power of working with other people, working in community. He talks about the power of managing your thoughts. And he talks about the power of living in your passion. It's all in there. And so, if from a spiritual perspective, you're like, I don't want to go religious way, go to Napoleon Hill.
Well, I know Renee, my company, right? The founder and CEO was a very faith-driven man as well, and he said the ultimate personal development book is the Bible. And he did have a cassette that I'll have to find someday if you've ever got a cassette player, and I'll mail it to you because it's really, really interesting. On that note, I know we want to make sure that if people want to engage with you further, have a conversation, talk to you at all. I know you're just awesome. You've been very helpful to me in my time of need with, some loss and all that. And you've been very helpful to a lot of our friends and colleagues that have hired you. I've heard great things about you. So I definitely want to make sure that if anybody, especially on replay, is watching this, that they can take a look at there's your email. Is that your website, or is that your what's the talk one?
So the Let's Talk, that's actually to my calendar. So if you want to schedule some time with me, you can schedule a 30-minute session and let's talk. Let's see how I can be of support to you.
And then what's the PC program?
The PQ program is
You.
the Positive Intelligence Program, and it's a program that really helps you identify what's sabotaging you, those negative thoughts. And it's an app-based program that helps you figure out how to stop and switch. And so if you want to learn more about that program, you can go there.
Perfect. Well, it went fast as always. Thank you so much for being on the show, Renee. You know that I adore you, and so appreciate you being on the show. With that, I just want to be mindful of everybody's time and say thank you for watching us live. You can always comment and interact and play with us if you like. But if you're watching on replay, we appreciate that as well. So this was the 55th episode, March 3rd, 2022 episode of On the Fly with Kai with Renee Remy. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, Renee. Take care, take charge. We'll see you guys next week and Over the Top. Bye-bye.